Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Victon YA event. I'll be your chair for the evening. My name is Sonali Misra, and I use pronouns she and her. I'm an Indian author and PhD researcher in publishing studies in Scotland, though through the wonders of technology, I am logging in today from a valley in the Himalayas in India. I am joined today by the author of the fantastic new release, Ace of Spades, Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé. Faridah is the instant New York Times and indie-bound best-selling author of Ace of Spades. She is an avid tea drinker, a collector of strange mugs, and a recent graduate from a university in the Scottish Highlands, where she studied English literature. Thank you for joining us today, Faridah.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited. So today, Faridah and I will talk about her book and writing process for the first 35 to 40 minutes. You, the audience, will have a chance to send your questions too by emailing us at questions@wictonbookfestival.com. That is questions@wictonbookfestival.com. Please do get that going, and we'll try to cover everyone's questions within that 10 to 15 minutes Q&A round. And we'll also aim to keep this discussion free of any big spoilers. So to start off, Faridah, congratulations on the success of your debut, Ace of Spades, which has made the New York Times bestsellers list and was snapped in $1 million book deal last year while you're pursuing your undergrad in Scotland.
Oh, thank you.
I love how you've mentioned on your website that Ace of Spades is pitched as Get Out meets Gossip Girl, but gayer. It follows the story of two Black students in an overwhelmingly white elite high school as they're targeted by an anonymous bully who threatens their reputations at first, leading to much sinister implications. How does it feel 3 months since the release?
It's really lovely seeing how everybody's reacted to the story. I was really worried about just whether or not people would connect to it, but there's been a lot of wonderful reactions and I get DMs every day. So yeah.
That's amazing. So what inspired the idea for this book?
So a few things. I started university in 2017. I'm from London originally, and my area in London's very diverse. My school was mostly Black and brown people. And so I never really had the experience of being the only kind of person of color in a room until I got to Scotland and I was going to university there. And I started having really microaggressive experiences, and I just kind of needed an outlet to talk about it, and I decided to write a book. But also I was watching Gossip Girl at the same time because I didn't really have many friends, so I was really struggling with things to keep me occupied when I had free time. And so I really loved Gossip Girl, and I really wanted to write something similar but with Black characters centered. And I also wanted to answer the question of what would happen if you put a Black character in this elite society, basically.
I mean, that's a great way to approach it. I completely understand where you're coming from because I'm originally from India and I studied in Scotland as well. And although I was in a multicultural class, I mean, the difference is stark to me because in India, I am part of the majority and suddenly you become a minority here. But also a great way to approach it where binge watching TV shows is something I do as well. And questioning when you go back, all the Gossip Girl isn't that old, but just going back and questioning what would happen if the cast was more diverse, I think is a great way to approach these cult favorites that we have. So love that. The plot of Ace of Spades is so gripping that I read it in a day. I just had to know what happens next. But I also cared about the characters and our two first-person narrators, Devon and Chiamaka. So what came first for you, the plot or the characters?
I think they came together for me because I was thinking of the elite school that it would be taking place in, and also the characters I'd want to populate the school. And so it was kind of moving at the same time. I was oh, I need characters that balance each other in some way. So I thought that people that are at opposition of each other is really a good way of showing character growth and stuff. So I really wanted to write and cover so many things, and so each character represents something. There are characters that are white and working class, characters that are rich and Black, so I really wanted to have so many conversations. So everything was happening all at once. I'm not really sure how I was doing it, because it just was all just like kind of spilling out on the page as I was doing like the process of planning it.
No, I have to commend you on that because I do feel like you've addressed a huge array of topics and themes, but it never feels like you're preaching at us or it's like an academic essay or you're covering too much because it all fits very nicely within this amazing plot that you have. And it's so pacey. Like you have to stay awake. This is one of those books that people are going to stay up the entire night just turning the page to finish it, and it is completely worth it. It's got such a great payoff. So I highly recommend buying this book. And I have just been told that we've not been on for like 5 minutes. I've already made a mistake. I'm sorry for that. So if you have any questions for us, the email address is questionsvicton@gmail.com. So please note this down. It's questionsvicton@gmail.com. Okay. I love how you said that both of these characters kind of are in opposition to each other because that's something I felt while reading the book too. And it's depicted on both the American and the British versions of the book cover as well. Devon and Chiamaka are mirror images of each other, I found, in several ways, in terms of their gender, of course, but also sexuality and how they approach it, their class positioning, the space they occupy, and the social hierarchy. Even in the continued imagery of drowning, it is ominous for Chiamaka, yet calming for Devon. Could you talk us through a bit about through these characters?
Yeah, I really like wanted them to almost feel like they were like puzzles for each other, like they fit together perfectly, but also they were so different. Like with Devon, he's very like quiet and like introverted and kind of wants to like not stand out and like just do his own thing. And he's like more into arts, whereas Chiamaka is into sciences and she's like very popular and wants to stand out and be known by people and respected. And I think by kind of creating these characters that like are opposite from each other, you kind of see how different Black people react to situations they're in. Because I think often, especially with people of color, we're kind of treated like we are a monolith, like we're all the same. And I really wanted to make people question that and like unpack why and how like that is incorrect. And with Devon and Chiamaka, they're also from different like socioeconomic backgrounds. Chiamaka's rich and Devon is working class. And I just really wanted to highlight the ways different aspects of our identity kind of uh, dictate like the way we approach life and the way we react to situations we're in, and also the way we view trauma. So like Chiamaka, for example, found drowning, like water imagery, very, very suffocating because she's not used to having to struggle. Whereas Devon is constantly in the struggle. So it's almost like comfort for him to be under the surface and like, having kind of so many oppressive things at once.
That's beautiful. I actually hadn't thought of it that way, but that makes complete sense now looking at the entire narrative as well. What I also loved that what you did was you kind of did this reversal of what you expect a man's interest to be and a woman's interest to be, or their positions in society. So you've made Chiamaka the leader. She is the head prefect. She is the popular one. She is the one who's interested in sciences, wants to be a doctor. Whereas Devon is the one who's, more the quiet, shy one, kind of like the wallflower, and just wants to stay, just do his business and leave, and is also attracted to the arts and loves his music. So I love how you did this reversal as well. That was great too. Was that, I'm guessing that was intentional as well.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like with girls, often, it's kind of drilled into you that you're meant to like, do things that are, I guess, not as ambitious. And I really wanted to kind of show Black girls that you can do these really amazing things. You can like be into science and you can be like speak your mind basically. I think a lot of the time growing up I was so scared of coming across as like an aggressive person because I'm already labeled as that by being a Black person. So I really wanted to show people that you can just be yourself anyway and be assertive. And I really wanted Chiamaka to give people that, and a lot of people have come to me and like been so appreciative. So I'm really happy it like resonated with them. And then with Devon, I feel like a lot of boys of color, they're often forced to like not show emotions because people adultify them and make them grow up too fast. And often like it's dehumanizing because, you know, they take away their ability to feel emotions or be connected to things that aren't, you know, the stereotypically like male thing. But I really wanted to break down the barriers of like what we see as like gender specific interests and like characteristics.
Yeah, no, I completely got that from the book as well, because Chiamaka has to reiterate this multiple times that just because I'm a woman, I feel like I've had to fight harder for this. And it's easy for people to cast me in that role of a villain because I'm willing to do what it takes to get power. And I believe there are many situations, if the genders were reversed, people wouldn't question it as much, or they wouldn't question her that much. So I loved your approach to her as well. And we'll talk a bit more about Chiamaka because she's one of my favorite characters in this book. So I love how you mentioned the image of the monolith and how Black people can be seen as that, as just being one specific thing. Because one thing I really appreciate that you've done in this book is you've explored intersectionalities through both these characters. So it's not a story about just a Black person in a country like the US, because we are never just one thing, even if that one thing is our ethnicity. How does that relate to your own experiences?
Yeah, so like I'm Muslim, I'm Black, you know, I'm a woman, and so many like experiences I'm experiencing at once. Because you know, I can't separate like being a woman from being Black or Muslim. I'm always these things all at one time. So I really wanted to show how like people are so kind of complex and multifaceted, and how like one identity informs the other. So like being a Black Muslim is very different from being a white Muslim or a brown Muslim. Or like, for example, you know, Devon is Black and gay, and that's very different. You see it, the way it affects him, the way he moves through the world differently from
Mm,
like the white gay characters. Same with Chiamaka, you know, she is biracial, and she's also like someone that has a tough time speaking to her parents about things. And so I feel like by representing like intersectionalities, it's like showing that people are, you know, fully like one thing. They never split into different parts. They don't decide to be, you know, a woman on one Wednesday to Friday, and then you know, they don't decide to, I guess, you know, be one culture one day and one culture the next. It's just really always what you are. So I really wanted to represent that.
mhm. No, I completely get that because I personally relate to that as well, because I have different aspects of my personality and I could be privileged in many ways and not so privileged in other ways. And how I react to a situation, how I respond to any struggle addresses each part of it. I completely agree. It's not like I'm a woman Monday to Wednesday and then I'm Indian or I'm a brown woman, the rest of the week. So I really appreciated you doing that in this book too. And again, it doesn't feel like you're preaching at us. It just fits in so naturally because these characters are so rich. They're not cardboard flat characters at all. And they've got such great depth to them. I mean, I would love to read more narratives about them. Um, so, like I mentioned, speaking of these intersectionalities, I wonder whether Devon was the first to suspect, with Terrell's help, that the bullying could be racist in nature because he also hails from a working class background, like you mentioned. Whereas Chiamaka, who is protected to a certain extent by her social class, realizes it much later. So, how does class interact with race here in your book?
I feel like Devon has had to be hardened at a young age because the world hasn't been as kind to him. And I really wanted to show how, you know, class can't really protect you. Like money can't protect you when white supremacy is involved. You can't kind of buy your way out of being discriminated against if you're a person of color.
Mm,
So I really wanted to show Chiamaka coming to realize that she can't, like, life isn't a meritocracy. She can't like climb her way up the ladder. She's always going to, you know, be several steps behind people because of a system that has nothing to do with her.
mm,
And so Devon is already aware of this because of his class. And I come from a working class background. And so even when I wasn't really aware of what racism was, I could feel it very heavily, like kind of looming in the background like a monster under your bed. It was like always there, but I didn't really have the words to articulate what it was. And so, similar to Devon, he definitely is a lot less forgiving, or like a lot less naive to the world and what it's capable of.
Mm-hmm. No, that again makes complete sense because he can see it in his own surroundings, in his relationship with Andre, and Andre doesn't have the privilege that Devon does of getting that scholarship to a very elite school. So he has to make do with the options that are available to him, which unfortunately is dealing drugs and the troubles that gets him into. But again, like you mentioned, life isn't a meritocracy. Just because someone may be capable of being good at something, may have the potential to be great at something, you sometimes just do not have those options available to you. And
Yeah.
then people end up getting into crime because they just don't have any options available. It's just a vicious cycle. And this system set up against you, the odds are stacked against you. So there's only so much you can do at an individual level. And Devon gets that. I remember there's a passage where he says that I'm happy that Jay can at least make rent and have his own place, although I wish it wasn't through such a dangerous method, but I get it. So Devon can completely empathize because that's the neighborhood he's grown in, that's the community he's grown in. So it makes complete sense that he's not as naive and gullible as Chiamaka is. But one of my favorite lines in the whole book, although there are like so many of these amazing lines, I have so many highlights in the book, um, is when Chiamaka is talking about her hair and how she prefers usually straightening it when she goes to school. And she says that she can straighten the kinks in her hair, but how can she straighten the kinks in the system? I'm paraphrasing here. How can she straighten the kinks in the system that's set up against her? So, and then she also talks about how her friends come from old American money. These are white friends that she has. So even though she personally comes from old Italian money, it's still not the same thing because she's mixed race and she would always be, like you mentioned, a few steps behind. I could just talk about this book all day. I love it. I'm pretty sure I remember different parts of it now. I can just like get into detail with you. But yeah, speaking of Chiamaka, I am especially intrigued by the choices you made for her. We've seen that stereotype of the mean, rich, popular girl in school who's very easy to villainize, very easy to cast her in that role. But it's usually played by a white woman, even in the example that you took of Gossip Girl. So Chiamaka, who's a mixed race character born to Italian and Nigerian parents, starts off as that unlikable mean girl who'll step over others to cement her place. As the writer of color myself, I feel the pressure to make my characters more likable and palatable for a white readership. So, how did you approach Chiamaka's character?
So I felt like Ace of Spades was never going to be published, and so when I was writing it, I was just kind of like thinking what I was interested in reading, and so I kind of made her like the character that I really wanted to be, but also just someone I found fun and interesting, and kind of ignored the white gaze while I was, writing. And so with Chiamaka, I think writing her being unlikable and unapologetic was almost freeing for me, because I think when I was growing up and when I was her age, I was really obsessed with making sure I was palatable for white people to, kind of digest or like interact with. I almost was like a product of myself. Like I was not really a full person because I was constantly trying to perform a character so that they would be happy with, the version of me that they were speaking to or presented with. And so with Chiamaka, I wanted to kind of fight back against that. So she was, being her full self. There was obviously things that were affecting her, because I really wanted to show that she's human and like she's flawed, and she's conditioned to feel a certain way about herself because of the way the world is anti-Black. So I really was writing Chiamaka in a way to both kind of discuss the mean girl, like, that you see in TV, even the white mean girls, but I think are a lot more complex than we're led to believe. Like even Regina George, you can see there's a lot of self-hatred. Like when I was watching Mean Girls recently again, it was so interesting seeing that scene where Regina is kind of writing something in the burn book and like saying, I really hate this person. They're just so ugly and awful. And then the camera slowly zooms out and you see it's her that she's talking about. and you see that she has like this self-hatred, and she like is obsessed with her flaws. And so I feel like Mean Girls are just such interesting characters that often get like written off as just being like one-dimensional, when really I think that there's a lot more to them. And with Chiamaka, by having her have her own perspective, you can see her slightly unravel as time goes on, and you can see like what's really going on, that she has more to her under the surface. So I really love Mean Girls, and I love kind of discussing how Black women are, you know, treated and portrayed, and kind of making people unpack their biases when they're reading a character, and make them kind of force them to understand like what's really going on. I feel like a lot of the time Black girls don't get often offered a lot of grace or like understanding. So I really wanted Chiamaka to be someone that was unlikable, but you're also forced to like her by the end. I mean, some people still don't like her, but a lot more people like her than I thought they would, because she's human at the end of the day.
No, I completely related to her because I feel like, because I may be a driven person, I may be ambitious, and I speak my mind, I may come across as aggressive. And especially operating in a majority white community, I feel the pressure of almost representing my entire culture, which isn't really fair for an individual to do. Like, I can't be just Sonali. Sometimes I have to represent Indians, which is a huge load. We're a huge number of people. That isn't fair at all. Um, but also, I agree that I think villains are just much more fun to write because no one really thinks that they're the villain. Everyone has a rationale behind what they're doing, why they're doing. And no one just wakes up and says, I'm going to be an agent of chaos today, unless they're a very caricature kind of character. Like, all of the villains are really interesting because they have their own reasoning behind it. And at some level, it makes sense, you know. Also, I think that's why we're having this really interesting resurgence of villain-centric movies. Like, you have Cruella coming out now, and I don't know who else they're going to cover now with these Disney movies, where you have the perspective of all these villains coming out now, and they make for great stories too. Sometimes ridiculous, but really fun. Um, but yeah, with Chiamaka as well, I think it wasn't just her and at an individual level doing something that might have been a bit negative or gray area, because again, when we get to understand her more and listen to her perspective and read it from in her own voice, I think just it speaks to more to the system forcing minoritized people like her to fight for the survival and for power at each turn. It's not, again, like I mentioned, she woke up one day and said that I am going to be rude and mean to all the girls around me. Sometimes she just did not have a choice. She was forced into that system. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
To be honest with you, like I mentioned, I love this book. I read it within 24 hours. It was very enjoyable, yet extremely uncomfortable for me as well. My skin crawled, my heart palpitated, and I actually felt like throwing up at a few points. The sinister quality of something being off, of a monster hidden in the shadows, begins from the first chapter itself, when no one is surprised to see the spade on the screen at morning assembly. And it just grows and grows until, well, I wouldn't mention any big spoilers here. So, what attracted you to this genre and style? And is this something that you usually operate in, or do you have other things that you usually work on as well?
So I feel like I'm quite like a dark-minded person. Like ever since I was young, I've always loved like darker shows and like things that had like a sinister, claustrophobic feel to it. Like when I was growing up, I really loved the show Ruby Gloom. I also loved it's like a UK show. Do you know Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids?
No, I
Um,
don't. Sorry.
it's like a show where each episode it just shows like really awful kids and like really like scary things happening to them. And then I also loved House of Anubis, which is like about secret societies and a boarding school. And it's really scary, or it was scary to me at the time. But yeah, I've always loved really dark shows. So I think it's just what I've always been drawn to. Just things that make you feel like someone's following you. But also, I feel like racism is also horrific. And someone, I think it was a documentary called think it's horror noir, but basically it talks about horror, Black horror. And there's a quote from the show, and it said, Black history is Black horror. And I really think that that quote kind of encapsulates why I was writing Ace of Spades in this way. I think that when you look at the history of like what Black people have been through globally, it's just horrific. And it makes my skin crawl and makes me feel sick. And so just like trying to get that vibe when I was writing as well, and how claustrophobic it can be, being in a white space and not having protection and knowing anything could happen to you. I really wanted to have that feeling come across.
No, I think you achieved that. Did the book start off within the genre, or did you change your mind at any point?
Yeah, I think it was always meant to be kind of a mystery, but I think I got surprised as I was writing how dark it was getting. But I always knew the plot points and the kind of the twist, but I never knew it was going to be as dark as I was making it as I was writing.
Was it something that you think you were going through personally at the time, or is it just a story? Is that's the story that it was? That's what the story deserved.
I think I definitely was going through it at the time, even though I love Scotland so much. It's such a lovely place, and I really want to like live there again someday. I feel like at the time I was new to the area, and like my university is in a very small town. It's Aberdeen, so it's not as big as like cities like Glasgow and Edinburgh. And there were just so many new things I was experiencing that were really, really scary. Like there's a character in Ace of Spades called Jamie, and there's a boy in real life from my university who he's not based on Jamie, but like, or Jamie's not based on him, but a lot of the experiences I had with that person kind of reminds me of Jamie. Like I remember one time I was at my university's like kind of student center at night because I have bad anxiety. So I used to go there just to be around people. And he was just like speaking and he randomly yelled the N word at me. And all the white people paused in the room and then everybody started laughing. And the laughter was just going on and on. And I was just the only person of color and I was like surrounded by them. And like I felt like I was in a horror movie, like, you know, Get Out, when he's just around them and they're all looking at him. It felt like that. So I had so many scenarios where that was happening. And I would just go home and start writing like Ace of Spades, and it would feel like a therapy session where I was kind of unpacking what had happened that day at university.
I'm really sorry that happened to you. And I mean, people will look at a movie like Get Out and think it's very heightened emotion, but that is very scary to think that something that actually happened in your life paralleled something that we look at a movie and say, oh, it's completely heightened, it's completely just hyperbole, and this doesn't really happen in real life. Those are the scary thoughts that this could actually happen in our lives, in our world. Oh, wow, okay. But speaking of the genre, I felt like personally this horror thriller genre seemed like this perfect fit for the reality that so many African Americans and Black people elsewhere face too. We're reminded that this book could easily be based in our own world, like we just talked about, because incidents such as white people touching Chiamaka's hair and mispronouncing her last name, she being accused of stealing in a shop, and she and Devon being stopped by a cop bring up that fear and uncertainty. Reading the advice that Devon's mother gave him in case he has a run in with the police broke my heart, honestly. If I can read it aloud for everyone here. His mother says, if they ask you questions, answer politely. Don't go searching for your phone. Don't touch your pockets. Don't, please don't. Just do as they ask. Put your hands where they can see them. I love you. This combination of all of these don'ts, of warnings, combined with his mother saying, I love you, as if it's the last time she gets a chance to say it, it genuinely just broke my heart. Um, what role do you think commercial fiction books like yours, like specifically commercial fiction, genre fiction, and books like Tomi Adeyemi's Children of Blood and Bone, or Shannon Smart's Witches Steeped in Gold, and so many of the other amazing recent releases, what role are they playing in this dialogue about race today?
So I feel like it's a lot of, you know, different things at once. Like, for example, the dialogue about like the amount of representation in publishing. I think books like these kind of like they show that books by Black authors with Black characters can do well and are like needed in the world. But also books that do touch on real life things when it uses allegory, for example, with Children, Blood and Bone and Ace of Spades. Um, it definitely allows you to have conversations about racism in a way that's digestible for like teenagers who might not be able to read a history book and understand fully the kind of like academic words or, you know, just the level of violence that is being depicted. It kind of eases them into it using kind of metaphors, and that can be powerful as well. But in terms of, you know, the way like events are depicted, like even the quote you read from when Devon's mom is talking to Devon, it's kind of like showing real life, like real world situations that happen to, you know, Black kids, where we have conversations about the dangers of being, you know, on the street and being stopped by a police officer. Like I remember when I was younger and the London riots were happening because of the killing that happened for Mark Duggan by the police officers in London. Like my mom was always, you know, very anxious because I've got an older brother, and she'd always tell him to stop wearing his hoodies out and like to like, you know, stay close to home and not walk around too much and stuff, because she was just so worried. And I didn't really understand why there was so much paranoia in the house at the time, or why the paranoia kind of persisted as he grew older and taller. And, you know, I think these books kind of help unpack that for children that are reading and trying to understand racism and trying to understand the world around them, because I didn't really understand what was happening to me or what I was experiencing in the world until I was maybe 16, and I started to read stories, or I started to like really think about things carefully, because you know, you're not really born with like a manual on how to deal with white supremacy. You kind of are thrown into it, and like trauma happens as a result, and you kind of have trauma responses to that. So I think books like this kind of help Black children through it and help them cope and show them that they're not like imagining things. So yeah, I think it's so important to have stories like this in the world.
No, I completely agree, because it is amazing to have these conversations in different forms, whether that's through academic essays or it's through a schooling system. Um, but again, like you mentioned, they're not always accessible, whether it's for a certain age group or it's for certain, just like understanding of vocabulary and understanding of different terminology. And it is extremely important for kids to know that they're not imagining things. If they feel like they're being targeted, if they're being harassed, it's not in their head. And narratives like this can help them. Allegories are so important, they're so powerful. I always feel like discussing important messages, discussing issues within society through a creative form has a lot bigger, has just a bigger impact than perhaps writing a journal article about it or like an academic essay about it. I say that as a PhD researcher, but also as a writer. Like I understand the need for both of the forms, but I understand where one can perhaps outshine the other in just reaching the masses, especially through genre fiction. I am really happy to see narratives like this entering the genre fiction, the commercial fiction space, because I feel like they were usually reserved for literary fiction, which again can be very niche, cannot be as accessible. And it's great to see books like this entering not just the commercial fiction space, but also young adult space, so that kids can also pick them up, confidently read them, not only have an amazing narrative that's going to hook them, but also learn things and start having these conversations about it. Um, at this point, since we're discussing race, I wondered if I could also read another excerpt. This is the incident, the conversation between Chiamaka and her mother when she's basically braiding Chiamaka's hair. So Chiamaka's, this is her perspective. In the reflection is a girl who looks like me, only different. Normal me has her hair whipped into straightness, a full face of makeup 5 days out of 7, and the look of eternal confidence. Now I stare at myself like I always do, confused by this thing my hair can do. It can go into the style and change me completely. I'm no longer Chi, but Chiamaka, daughter of a Nigerian mother who loves the hair on my head more than I ever could. Thanks, Mom, it's great. And I mean it. I love having my hair like this, but I never go outside like this ever. It's too risky. I'd rather straighten than get prodded and stared at, stroked like an animal and questioned, like Jamie looking at me yesterday as if I were some science experiment he's intrigued by. I want to stand out for being the smartest and the best, not because my hair frizzes and fascinates. Mom appears behind me in the mirror, and I turn to face her. She smiles at me like she's so proud. If only she knew all the things I've done, who I really am. Did I ever tell you the meaning of your name? Mom asks. I shake my head. I'd never really given it much thought. Mom's eyes look sad. Well, I named you after my mother. Like you, she was smart and beautiful, knew what she wanted and what she didn't. Her smile widens. Chiamaka means God is beautiful, and Adebayo from my father means she who came in joyful time. Mom never talks about her family. I've never even met them or been to Nigeria. But I know Mom loves them. Sometimes she'll cook something and say, this was my mom's favorite. Or she'll tell me about her childhood and the busyness of Lagos, where she grew up. Think New York is busy? Lagos is truly the city that never rests. But she never goes into detail, just gives me glimpses of her past life before she married dad. I'm always left feeling unsatisfied, like I dreamed of eating a meal after being starved for a year, got to have a bite, and then had it quickly snatched away before I could even sate my hunger. I sometimes wonder if Mom's family were as disappointed in her for marrying dad as dad's family were when he married Mom. I wonder if they ever met me, whether they'd hate me for just existing like dad's family does. Did your parents ever get to meet dad? I ask, treading carefully, wanting to get as much as I can out of her before she snatches it away for good. Mom shakes her head. Although, like your dad and I, my parents came from different worlds. While they were both Nigerian, they were from different tribes. My mother was Igbo and my father was Yoruba. I felt lucky growing up to have that mix of such rich cultures, and I wanted you to feel that too. I wanted you to see your name and feel the richness of where you're from. I wanted you to know that when I call your name, Chiamaka, I'm saying, my daughter is beautiful and smart and brings me so much joy. Her eyes are glassy as she takes my face into her hands and kisses my forehead. I smile, feeling teary, but not because I'm sad. I never thought to be proud of my name like that before, or knew that it had some special meaning. I have to go and get ready for work now, she says, wiping her eyes and pulling away. I wish Mom would stay and tell me more. I wish she worked less and spent longer telling me all about the world she grew up in, who she was before me. But instead, I watch her move away. This whole section is so powerful and so beautiful and just shows us the importance of names and where we come from, our heritage, our culture. And again, like I mentioned, you've just like threaded in this other narrative, this other aspect of her identity, of her being mixed race, and the complexity that comes from that, where her parents' families don't get along with each other. She mentions at some other point that when the kids are in trouble, and we always look at these movies when teenagers are in trouble, they're trying to catch murderers, whether it's like Riverdale, the show or not. And you're like, why isn't anyone going to the adults? Go to the grown-ups. Why are you trying to solve this by yourself? Chiamaka explains why. She says, I can't go to my dad because I don't know if he'll stand for me, if he'll believe me, because he didn't stand up to his mother when she used racist terms for me. And that again just broke my heart. But again, kudos to you for threading in these amazing, complex narratives in together seamlessly. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I have lots of other questions, but we already have a question from the audience. This is from an Andy, not our Andy from the victim, someone else. What was the most challenging part of writing your novel in terms of the actual writing process and or perhaps more generally, in terms of your personal life experiences, which informed your perspective as an author, being able to write such a novel in such a way?
I think in terms of just writing a story, I think it's quite difficult to know if anything you're writing is actually working, because you're like, writers are often working in like solitude for such a long time. Like we're all like alone until we have someone that believes in our story and tries to sell it to a publisher. And so often we're just alone, having to trust our own kind of thought processes and stuff, and having to convince ourselves that what we're writing makes sense. And it's hard to know if you're even wasting your time. So I think that's the biggest part that is like difficult for me, not knowing whether or not like my story is working. Luckily now I have like a team that can like tell me where I'm going wrong or if I'm doing something right. So definitely before I got published or like got an agent, that was the difficulty for me. And then in terms of like when it comes to personal things, I think the thing I found difficult was unpacking things that were still affecting me at the time. Because I was still kind of going through the kind of complex emotions that Devon and Chiamaka were experiencing, I had to like be asking myself questions and unpacking them and then writing them down. And so it was like I was giving kind of advice to my characters and also advice to myself as I was going through the motions. And it was really like, it was very like therapeutic in the sense that I felt a lot better once I was writing down all the things that I wanted to say, but also very difficult because you have to like, you know, face up to your own like brain and the way you've been conditioned to believe the world is, and also the way you are, you know. I felt really like ashamed of my culture for such a long time. When I was younger, I hated like my name and I hated just like my culture. I used to wish I was white, you know. So a lot of like kids of color go through that because they're taught that their culture is weird. And so I really wanted to, by that time I wasn't as bad when I was younger, as I was younger, but I really wanted to basically not only kind of speak to my younger self, but also to my current self, who was definitely doing a lot better. And I think it came through as I was like writing that I was doing better than I had been previously.
Now, you mentioned the beginning that writing this book was therapeutic for you in many ways. So, like you mentioned, just giving advice to yourself through it. And I don't know if the audience is aware of this, but Faridah started writing this book when you were 19, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
So imagine being a 19-year-old going through all of this, questioning your identity, questioning your place in the world, questioning your self-worth in many ways. And then not only writing this fantastic debut, it's one of the most impactful debuts I've read in quite some time, but also using that as a way to, you know, counsel yourself and give yourself strength. It's remarkable. It really is. I have more questions, but I can just remind the audience to send your questions to us at questionsvicton@gmail.com in the meantime, but I can just continue with ours until then. So sadly, this is another sad topic. Homophobia is still rampant in our society. You've shown two different approaches to a Black person accepting their queer identity through Devon and Chiamaka. Could you speak a bit about that as well?
Yeah, I think with Devon, for example, I think he's always known that he was gay, and he had already like come out to himself. By the time the story starts, he's already kind of comfortable with himself. It's just that he knows that the reaction he might get from others isn't always going to be a good one, because you know he's grown up in environments where people are speaking about queer people in like a really derogatory way, and so he has like the assumption that his mom's going to feel the same. And so throughout the book, you can see him really like struggling with whether or not to ever tell his mom, because it's something that could potentially break their relationship apart like permanently. And I think a lot of queer teenagers feel that way, especially because his mom is very religious. And that is often something that, you know, a lot of Black queer teenagers are grappling with, whether or not to, you know, disclose that they are queer in a religious household. So, but I really wanted it to be a happy ending for him. And, you know, it's like, I know it's kind of a spoiler, but like, I really want people to know that it's a good ending for him in that way, because it's important for me to show that. I don't think it would have been productive to show any other depiction of him coming out to his mum as being bad. I don't know what that would have really done for people. But with Chiamaka, on the other hand, she's kind of conditioned to never ever question her sexuality. And I feel like I wanted to kind of have a discussion about compulsory heterosexuality, which is something that basically a lot of people in the world, especially women, they're kind of told that their relationships with girls are very trivial, and that the male gaze is the only thing that matters. And so that's what Chiamaka's grown up to believe, that the male gaze is all that matters, and that heterosexuality is kind of what she is meant to basically strive towards. And so she never really thinks about her relationships with women in any other way. And I wanted to show someone kind of coming into themselves, but also it not being an awful experience, it almost being freeing for them to like discover aspects about themselves that they didn't previously know.
Yeah.
And so with Chiamaka, when she realizes that she is queer, she isn't like burdened by it. It's more so she feels like she can express herself in a different way now. And so I really wanted it to be a positive depiction of queerness. I think a lot of books and movies, queerness is almost seen as something that is always going to end up with a negative ending or has a negative connotation. And so I really wanted to challenge that and kind of turn that on its head.
Yeah, I think everyone is sick of people being queer in movies and books and then dying.
Yeah.
Everyone is so sick of that. We really need happier stories, because happy stories do exist as well for queer people. It's not like there's only one fixed narrative where you are always fighting against society, your church, or your family, and you will die prematurely before you can lead a happy, fulfilling life. That is not the only narrative available for LGBTQI people. It is so important to show that there are other narratives exist. So that was wonderful as well. And yeah, I think this is why I also empathize a lot with Chiamaka, because I grew up looking at other women as my competition, as if I'm pit against them for men's attention. And Chiamaka does the same, where she just feels like she's in competition with other women, doesn't see them really as friends. And the way she's getting popular is actually by dating in a very tactical manner. She's dating men in a very tactical manner to gain that social credibility. And how that completely turns around when she grows as a character too is just beautiful to see. I love her. I love her growth arc. It's amazing. I am very conscious of the time, so unless we have more questions coming in, I still have lots of more questions left. I think I will just end with one question, and then we can unfortunately say our goodbyes, although I'm really enjoying this chat. Um, can you tell us what you're working on next? Can you share anything about that?
So I think I can't say much detail, but I can say that it's a boarding school mystery, and the main character is Black and Muslim like me, because I always wanted that representation when I was younger. So I'm really happy that I get to write that representation kind of for myself as well. And yeah, it's a lot more like about friendships and like feminism. And yeah, it really is like kind of what I was interested in when I was 16, like the characters, because I was really into politics and like feminism when I was 16, and I really wanted to see kind of a Black character at the forefront of like a story like that. I really loved Holly Bourne's books growing up, so I really wanted more representation like that, but with like, Black Muslim leads.
That sounds amazing. I am definitely picking that up. Do we have any sort of date set for it, or is it still kind of in process?
Because my dissertation from university really destroyed my brain. I think it's probably going to come out like in 2023.
When was your dissertation due? When did you submit that?
Literally, I think a week before my book came out.
Wow, I cannot believe you juggled both of those together again. All power to you. That is amazing. So
Thank
remarkable. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Though I could sit and discuss this book with you for hours. I will definitely be sending more emails with my questions just to get responses, or just tweeting at you. Because I especially think this book will make a great selection for a book club read. And luckily for us, Ace of Spades can be found on the Wigton Festival Bookshop, which you should visit when you check out the website. A huge thank you to the audience for being so wonderfully engaging for the question. If you've enjoyed this session or any others at Wigton, please do consider donating to the book festival, which we can all agree is doing a fantastic job adapting to our changed circumstances. And speaking of Wigton Book Festival, thank you to the entire Fest team for bringing us all together and making this fantastic event happen. as well as the Hollywood Trust for the continued support of Victon's Young People's Activity. And of course, Faridah, thank you so much for giving us a peek into the world of Ace of Spades and your writing process. Where can we find you online?
I just want to say thank you so much for your brilliant questions. And you can find me online just at Faridah Likes Tea anywhere.
I love that, Dave. I was also really happy to see that was part of your little bio, because I'm like, that is another thing I connect with Faridah on. This is amazing. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I wish you all the best for your future writing projects, which this next one sounds amazing. We're all going to keep an eye out for it. 2023, everyone, pick up Ace of Spades from the Festival Bookshop and then keep an eye out on her next book in 2023. Thank you all for joining today.